Today's guest led the Majettes to a bounce-back season in his first year at the helm. Joining me now is Jason Schwarz, the Minot High girls basketball coach. Now, obviously, you've had a lot of different coaching positions that we're going to get into over the course of the podcast today. But just talk about just the sphere of being in the Minot program. What was the biggest responsibility change or jump to being the head girls coach at Minot High versus, like the sophomores, the JVs, any kind of assistant duties?
Well, I've been in the system, in the Minot High system before, back when girls basketball was in the fall, and I was a head coach out at Berthold, being the boys coach in the wintertime. I was able to spend a few years at the freshman level when girls basketball was in the fall, and so that was my first taste of being in the program at Minot High. And then when girls basketball switched from the fall to the winter, well, then you've got to coach one or the other. And already being the boys coach out at Berthold, that's what I stuck with. And then went on to Kenmare and then back to Minot High. And so, I've had exposure to all levels in the Minot High program, from the freshman on up, being the freshman coach, one of the freshman coaches for about 3 years, sophomore coach for a year, and JV coach for a couple years. So, I've got a good feel where we needed to be at every level within our program. And, I just came in knowing that, all right, we've got to try and make ourselves competitive every year within our program. And I think everybody wants to do that. But how can we best do it where we're at in our program right now? And so when I came in a year ago, that was one of the first things I looked at, is how are we going to get competitive on a yearly basis at the varsity level. And we've got to get competitive first at the lower levels and work from the ground up instead of trying to work from top down, which you're trying to do that as well. So it's kind of like you're trying to bookend it and work from both ends. But, I think the biggest thing that I felt that we needed to change coming in was our culture. And that's a huge, big buzzword in sports and team atmosphere right now. But I truly believe that was the biggest thing that we needed to change in our belief system. I felt like where we were at with our present kids that we had, is they had the belief that, well, it was going to be pretty tough sled and playing the Bismarck Mandan teams. It was going to be pretty tough beating those teams. And it is. It's the truth. And for the longest time, it was the big elephant in the room, and we didn't address it. We didn't talk about it that much, and I was probably just as guilty as anybody for not doing that. And we even went into the season this year still doing that. We wanted to change the culture, we wanted to change the belief system, and we were took a step-by-step approach. At this time last year, I was deep into trying to get my hands on everything that I could that dealt with culture. I don't care if it was taking a course online, if it was digging into 5 to 10 books on team culture, talking with coaches, sending emails, talking to them over the phone, trying to get so many different angles, both from men's, from women's, to high school, to college, to pro. Who were coaches that were successful stepping in and changing and turning programs around right away. And so that was probably the biggest thing that I wanted to tackle. And I came up with kind of our manifesto, if you will, of what, and we called it and labeled it the Majette way. This is the way we're going to do things in our program starting right now. And we decided to kind of put it everywhere. We didn't plaster it everywhere that I wanted to quite yet. We're still working on some of those things, but we want to get some things in the locker room, get some things up on the wall where kids see it every day. And the first place we put it is on their practice jerseys. We put things on the front, we put things on the back. They were reversible jerseys. When you reversed it, you still saw those words, the Majette way, believe, play hard, play smart, play together, have fun. And to try and change it in that way, where we talked about it every day, you saw it every day, and but we still had the elephant in the room that we didn't, really address. Okay, how are we going to get to the top? And who did we have to get through? We always talked about, well, Century is always at the top in girls basketball in the WDA and the state for that matter. But it wasn't until we went to Bismarck High this year, played really poorly. Probably our worst game to that point and probably our worst game of the season. I felt we should have beat Bismarck High here. We lost by 1 point. We turned the ball over almost 30 times. I think it was 32 times, something. We actually turned them over more than they turned us over. I think they had something like 36. Very ugly game.
It's all right. I don't think they put the turnover records up on the wall, Coach.
No, they don't.
Maybe you did during a practice, but
yeah, but that was a game I felt we should have won, lost by 1, and then we go down there and all right, let's get them on their home court, and it didn't happen. And so when the game was over, it was time to talk about the elephant in the room, and I let's address this right now. Playing Bismarck teams, playing Mandan teams, you guys come into the game feeling like and thinking like this isn't going to happen. We're not going to win. We saw it in the summer when we played them. We've seen it in the previous seasons. Literally 2 days later, we played Mandan at home and we beat them. And they're a better team than Bismarck is, without a doubt. And so, that was something that we were able to really hone in on and talk about. Okay, look at what you guys did. In 2 days, you completely flip the script. And so do you see what the power of you guys believing in yourselves, believing in each other, believing in this team, believing in our system, when you guys put it together and believe what you can do? And so any of those nuggets that we can grasp onto that, hey, where we've got some kind of success, we've got to really latch on to that and use that to catapult us to the next one. And so it was good that we had some of those things happen this year. We beat Mandan at home. We beat Legacy at home. And so those are some things that we can now build on going into our off-season workouts and going into next year that, we can do this. And so that's been the biggest thing. We've got to continue on with it this year now as well.
Is Legacy the high point of the team's season, or is there anything else that maybe really lends itself for the team going in a better direction? I look at it, I reported on the news, that's a huge win for you guys. Finally, that team loses. But I'm not at every practice for the whole time. I'm not at games for the whole time, Coach. So is there anything that, even fans that go to more games and see all the games maybe wouldn't see when it comes to, boy, this change is really taking place for you guys?
Well, I think everyone that, comes to watch us play at least from time to time, or those that are there every game, that's usually the parents, saw the progress that we were making. Knowing that we were capable talent-wise, but you've got to have your heart in it as well, believing in each other that this is something that you can do. And, when you go to the locker room immediately after the game, we had 6 seniors this year. And when I walk in, one of the first things one of them says is, well, we've never beaten Mandan in my career, or we've never beat Legacy in my career. And for those 4 freshmen, they hadn't at the varsity level anyway. And so that was huge. We needed that. And, we still talked about you got to win the games that you're supposed to win as well. And just getting them to start to see that and feel that. But we had a lot of younger kids that were sitting back and having to experience the same thing that those freshmen were, those seniors experienced when they were freshmen, because most of them, I think 5 of the 6, we all brought up to the JV varsity level when they were freshmen. So they had been with us for 4 years.
What do you tell the girls right back when they say, boy, Coach, that's awesome. I've never beaten Mandan, but then you say, hey, well, practice is tomorrow, and it's not just about beating Mandan, there's bigger things that we can do.
Well, but at the same time, you have to find a way to celebrate every little success that you have, or big success, because this is what we're after. This was what our goal is, and we finally accomplished a big step within our goal. And so it's a lot easier to motivate when you go back to practice and you've had some success, or a lot of success in those two cases. We're all right, starting to believe now, starting to believe that we can do this. And that was, I mean, learning to win is a huge thing, but we've learned to lose. And I've had teams and the programs that I've been a part of in the past where, man, we learn to lose. And it gets just as contagious as turning the ball over, or when the ball's going in the basket, or when the ball's not going in the basket, or when you're winning and things are really rolling. Those things can get contagious. And so losing was just something that it just came too easy to us. We didn't know how to win. We didn't know how to fight, how to win. And so we needed to have a little bit of success this year to gain some momentum.
When you're named the Minot High head coach and you get on that drawing board right away and you pour into all the things online, the books, the 5 to 10 books that you're talking about, are there any maybe prominent coaches or players' messages that kind of helped form that Majette Way manifesto that you were talking about?
I would say that the one coach that I probably took the most away from in my time with being in the coaching profession is Don Meyer, and he's no longer with us. But he literally is one of the best coaches that's ever lived. And I got to know him when he came to Aberdeen, but he was a coach that got to know John Wooden, and got to know a lot of big-time coaches. And he had a coaching academy that he used to have in Aberdeen every summer. And it would be 3 days of sitting in the bleachers and your back hurting and your butt hurting and whatever. And literally your hand hurting more than anything because you were taking notes at a rapid pace and doing it all day long, because everything that was coming out of his mouth was absolutely gospel. And he loved sharing knowledge of the game. I was fortunate for one of my Berthold players to go and play for him. And, he did something for me that was almost unheard of. A lot of college coaches probably don't do this with high school coaches of the players that they have at their universities. But when I came to watch, he insisted that, hey, I want you in the locker room pregame. I want you to come down to the locker room at halftime. I want you to come down postgame. And his kids all had notebooks, and they literally had to take notes whenever he was speaking. So, Adam Grant was the one that had went and played for him. And every time Adam came back over Christmas time, I always told him, bring your notebook, because it was just loaded with knowledge. And I would just photocopy everything off from him. But he was one that I first heard the term play hard, play smart, play together. And for me as a coach, that's probably the biggest thing that I want to hear from other people when they see our teams play, and that is that they see us play hard. And that was one of the comments that I heard when I talked to other WDA coaches about, they maybe hadn't played us yet, but saw us on film, or the word out on the street was, man, your kids work extremely hard. Probably one of the best compliments I've ever got was from a fan when I was coaching out at Berthold at tournament time, an old-timer. Nobody I knew, but he was from another town, comes up to me and he says, Coach, he goes, 2 things about your team. He said, I come watch your team at tournament time. He said, they play harder than anyone else, and they play together better than anyone else. And I love watching your teams. And that's always stuck with me. And after he told me that, I'm like, you know what? That's what I want. That's what I want from our teams. And so I think you saw that this year. We played really well together, and we played extremely hard. But, man, there's so many coaches that I've taken so many things from. I've had the opportunity to meet John Wood, and I was able to go to his house when he still was alive, and we sat down. It was just me and him for 3.5 hours. I spent some one-on-one time with Dale Brown. I was able to go down to meet him in Baton Rouge, and we spent 2 days together. And he took me to some LSU practices when I was down there. I've been to Tennessee and watched Pat Summitt when she was when she still was alive and watched her in action at practice. I was at Kansas when Roy Williams was there. So I try to get out there and see these coaches in action. The last one I was at Utah State this past fall. I know some of those guys. They've got Minot connections on that coaching staff, and so I'm not trying to copy what they do, but you're always trying to pull a little something. And I thought that Craig Smith at Utah State, he really turned the program around immediately when he got there last year. And I thought, I got to see what he's doing. I got to hear what he's doing because I want to try and do the same thing that he did and turn things around immediately because obviously it's possible.
Obviously, there's a lot of people that kind of have the Minot connections between Utah State, like you said, and even Dale Brown for sure. Going back to like St. Leo and all that. Curious how you got in touch for the type of connection with John Wooden that you were saying, getting Duvall's practices with Pat Summitt, and some of Roy Williams, if it was more than just going to games.
I think probably one of the best experiences I had was with Dale Brown. I had wrote him a letter back when I was in college and he still was coaching, and I really wanted to be a college coach back at the time, and so I wanted to go and be a grad assistant. And he was kind of known for plucking a North Dakota kid every once in a while to come and play at LSU or give it their shot. And so anyway, at the time they had gotten rid of their grad assistants. They didn't do it anymore. Some NCAA rules, whatever they were. So he did. He wrote me back before his senior year, and I was taking him out to a blue chip in Kentucky. And Dale Brown just happened to be on the plane as we were leaving Minot. And so anyway, when we got to Minneapolis, we touched base. He gave me his phone number, and that's kind of history. I was able to touch base with him. Some real cool experiences I had with Coach Brown was when he would come back. It was just nice experience because we'd travel in the car together and just talk. And then my assistant would usually come with me as well. But he'd give some of the same speeches. He kind of had everything pre-planned of what he was going to say. So. But listening to him speak at some schools in front of kids was really cool. And he spoke at Berthold when I was coaching there, and he spoke with our team as well. But he'd bring a shoe of Shaquille's. I believe it was like a size 24. Unbelievable how big that thing is. But getting to know him, he invited me to come down to LSU. He's got his own office down there, so he just said, bring everything that you want to talk about. So I sat across from his desk for 3 hours on a Friday and 3 hours on a Saturday, and we talked literally about everything within the game of basketball. I was able to go watch the women and the men practice at LSU and got to have some one-on-one meetings with some of the coaches down there. And so going to Don Meyer's academies in the summer in Aberdeen, he did bring in Pat Summitt. He brought in Sherry Cole from Oklahoma. He brought in Bill Self from Kansas. And so it was really cool to get close to those people. Well, one year, Coach Meyer wanted everyone to write a letter to John Wooden for his birthday. And so anyway, I did that, and I talked with Coach Brown, and I said, hey, what are the chances that I could sit down with Coach Wooden? And he goes, well, just write him a letter and see what he says. The worst he can tell you is no, but he knew him, but he didn't want to be the person to contact him. He wanted me to do it. And so I wrote him a birthday card and put in the letter, hey, I'd like to sit down and meet with you sometime. And I get a letter back in the mail one day, and I'm like, oh my God. And I've still got it in my file, and everything's handwritten. And in the letter, it said, hey, give me a call. When you call, there's going to be an answering machine. When the answering machine picks up, start to leave your message and just, say, hey, this is Jason. Coach, I got your letter. And sure enough, I start talking to the answering machine, and a few seconds later, he picks up. So it was his way of screening his calls. And man, I was shaking, talking to John Wooden on the other end of the phone. But it was really cool deal. We set up a time for me to go and go to his place and meet him. He gave me directions how to get to his house. He lived in a complex, a condo complex. And so sure enough, I pull up in the parking lot and he's out on his deck waving to me, and he buzzed me in. And you walk into his house, and Coach Meyer told me this too, because he had been there as well. But he said, when you go there, the place is like a museum. There was so many championship trophies and Coach of the Year trophies and all kinds of things. And so he kind of walked me through it. But cell phones weren't really a thing then. And so, I would have had my phone out taking pictures or video of everything there in his house, and maybe he wouldn't have wanted me to do that.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, but we didn't even get a picture together, But everything was old. There wasn't anything updated. There was old, shaggy carpet. His wife had passed away several years before that. But we sat down in his office, and it was kind of messy. But there was just memorabilia everywhere in there. And he's a huge baseball fan. Really, he was really good friends with Joe Torre, so he had autographed baseballs everywhere. Pictures framed and signed on the walls. It was really something to see. And he probably quoted more poems to me than anything. He had still had the sharpest of minds yet at that time. And I want to say he was 90 to 92, somewhere in there at the time. And so he still had lived a few more years beyond that. But it was a cool experience. And after that, I went and watched the Lakers play later that night, and I got to see Kobe and Shaq play. And that was kind of a whole nother cool idea too, because Tex Winter was an assistant coach with Phil Jackson at that time. And Tex Winter used to be an assistant of Dale Brown's. So I'm like shooting for the moon. I'm going to LA. I'm getting to see Coach Wood, and I'm like, well, let's see if I can meet Tex Winter too, And that one fell through. But when I called the Lakers office to try and make a connection, because I was able to get Tex Winter's number, he wasn't there when I called. So anyway, I ended up on the phone with Mitch Kupchak, who was the general manager at the time. And I'm like, man, this is unbelievable. I'm sitting on the phone. I'm talking to the general manager for the Lakers right now. Are you serious? And so he's like, well, Tex Winter's tickets are already spoken for. I can leave a message. You're going to be in town, but I'll get you a ticket. And I ended up 8 rows behind the Warriors bench that night and just couldn't believe it, And
8 rows behind the Warriors was probably way cheaper back then than it is now.
Yeah. I can't even recall anybody that played on the Warriors then. So, but that was just an unbelievable experience. And, I went to Tennessee, and their practices were completely open. And so sat in the front row watching Pat Summit, and she'd come over in the middle of practice and, just be all upset of how the team was performing that day, typical Pat. But, I got to hear her speak in a couple of places before I went there. But I spent, I think, 3 days down there. And the reason I was down there on that trip was Adam, who was playing for Don Meyer at Northern State. It was Adam's senior year, and they had an exhibition game with Kentucky. And I'm like, I'm not missing that. And so I'm a big Louisville Cardinals fan. And so I was trying to get in to Louisville to watch them practice when I went out there. And Rick Pitino was there at the time. And their practices are closed. There was like no way you're getting in. And I made several phone calls and just never could find a way to get in. So I was trying to do the same thing at Kentucky. I wanted to go watch their practices as well. Same deal. Practices are closed, and Tubby Smith was there at the time. And it was like, no way. No, practices are closed. So I'm like, well, whatever. I'll go drive down to Tennessee and spend some days down there. So I was down there. I came back. It's the day before the exhibition game. And I knew that they were practicing, and I knew what time they were practicing. So I go down to Rupp Arena, downtown Lexington, and they got security guards, and they're like, no, you can't go in. Practices are closed. I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. So I called the basketball office one more time, talked with the secretary, and she's like, no, I told you, practices are closed. All right, whatever. And so I did have a cell phone, but it was an old flip phone back then. And so I'm walking around downtown Lexington. I'm in a store, and all of a sudden my phone rings. And it's one of the assistant coaches for Kentucky, and they're like, is this Coach Schwarz? Yeah, it is. Well, I understand you're here and you want to watch practice. I said, I'd love to, but yeah, I can't get past the security guard. And they were like, well, he'll let you in now. I'm like, you serious? Yeah, you come on in, watch practice. No way. Yep. So I go around security guard. All right, just sign here and you're in. So I walk into the arena. There's nobody out on the court. Plush blue carpet that leads out to the court. So I go and I sit up in the stands, and slowly the players are coming out. Coaches come out. Last one to come out is Tubby Smith. He comes walking right up to the stands, introduces himself, nicest guy. Hey, if you need anything, just let us know, you know. So I'm watching practice. Practice gets over. He comes back up into the stands. How'd it go? I said, well, you know, we're talking, and I got a few questions about some of the things you ran, you know. And he goes, well, I'll help one of the assistants help you out. So anyway, we're walking off the court. He says, have you seen the locker room? No. There, let me take you back to the locker room. All right, let's go. So it was just him and I, and everyone else had kind of left. So we get ready to leave, and we walk out of the building, and he says, well, where are you parked? And I said, well, I had to park quite a ways away. Hop in my car. I'll give you a ride to your vehicle. So I'm sitting in the vehicle with Tubby Smith. He's giving me a ride, and I'm like, no way. You know, this isn't supposed to be happening. I wasn't even supposed to get into the building. So he said, well, what are you doing the rest of the night? And I said, well, nothing. I'm just waiting for the game tomorrow, you know. He goes, well, why don't you follow me back to campus? He says, why don't you come have dinner with us? Okay. So I follow him back to campus. The team had like their own dormitory, and by NCAA rules, you know, the team can't have their own dorm. So they had to have just as many other regular students in the dorm as they had basketball players, and then they could kind of have their own dorm. So they had their own chef. So I'm sitting at a table with the coaches at Kentucky, and a couple of them are talking about one of them having an interview with the Cleveland Cavaliers a couple of days ago because they needed a video guy, and their video equipment was the same at Kentucky as they have in Cleveland. And I'm just shaking my head, not believing that this is happening, you know. So we get done with dinner, and he says, well, why don't you come over to the office, and we'll get you some of that stuff that you had questions on. Sure. So he gets a grad assistant, and, you know, I had a question on a couple of their sets and plays that they ran. So he takes me back to his office, and it's this big, huge 3-ring binder. And I said, is that your playbook? Yeah, it is. I said, well, you wouldn't mind if I looked through that, would you? No, that'd be all right. So we go back in their conference room, and I literally am sitting there just thumbing through, and they're photocopying anything I wanted, you know. Got my picture with Tubby Smith in the national championship trophy. They had just won the national championship the year before.
What was the trip circumstance anyway? You were like, oh, if I strike out at Louisville and Kentucky, I'll just go to Tennessee. What was the original plan throughout all this?
I wanted to go to Kentucky and watch practices there, and I wanted to go to Louisville and watch practices there. Mm-hmm. But Knoxville is just down the road. I don't know if it was 2 or 3 hours, if that. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that far. And as a matter of fact, I got there on a Sunday, and the Vols football team had just played the night before. And so I went down to where the football field was, and sure enough, there was a door open. So I'm like, I'm going in. You know, so I went in, and I walked out onto the football field. It's empty. There's nobody there. Mm-hmm. So I just, you know, kind of snooped around campus. I went to a volleyball game. And I'm like, oh, these teams, they look pretty good. And I get a program, and I look, and they're both ranked within the top 10, you know. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm at a pretty good volleyball game right now.
Yeah.
And so it was just an unbelievable experience. And it couldn't have turned out any better. You know, the next day.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, the next day the men's team was like, hey, we're having a shoot around. You can come watch that too if you want. I went and watched the women's practice. So it turned out really, really cool.
Absolutely. I want to rein it back a little bit, back to being around Minot, Jason. Was you kind of mentioned a little bit about the feeling like in the coach's room a little bit was we needed like maybe a little bit of a culture shift, and you owned it even when you were an assistant. Like maybe like I should have said something, or we could have made the shift even sooner. If you're not head coach this year, and if you're in the same position that you are as last year going into this one, was the program headed in that direction? Do you think, or did you just need to take over?
Um,
Not like selling any other coaches short or anything, but I'm just
no,
kind of curious how what the direction was like.
well, I just think that, sometimes you need change for the sake of change. And I don't disagree with anything that we were doing previously. Coach Wasser was a heck of a coach. He had won 3 state championships in Montana. So I'm like, man, I want to work with this guy. I want to learn and know what he knows. Matter of fact, he lost a couple state championships as well. So, I mean, he's been in 5 state championship games, had a lot of success. But, he had his system, and I really liked his system. But, going into it this year, I thought, well, I think we need to just try and change the system. And I'm one of those ones where I'm flexible. I don't have a system, and this is what we're going to run every year. I'm one of those ones, I'll adapt from year to year. I'll adapt even within the year. There's times where we just have to completely scrap what we're doing, and we got to start over in the middle of the season. That doesn't happen a whole lot, but I just thought, okay, how many things can we change so that the kids feel change, and let's just get this thing turned around in another direction, and then let's just push as hard as we can going in that direction. And so, there were some things that we obviously were doing before that we tried to continue to do, but then tried to, like I said, just change things from what we did on the bus, from what we did in pregame, from what we did, leading up to practice every day, how we left practice every day. And so I tried to implement that change and put my thumbprint on everything that we did.
And you were around the program as the leaders of the team were growing up, so it probably was really easy for them to see the kind of deviations that you maybe had in mind right off the bat. So I'm just wondering, what kind of impact did you, as being in the big head coach's chair, the impact of some of the graduates this year? I mean, how much did they help you out, man? I'm thinking like Allie Nelson, Paige Rosencrantz, Landry Maragos, Laura McLean, Becca Cheddar, Tia Haskins. Because not only did you have those girls stepping up, but there was a lot of younger talent on the team that had record-breaking performances throughout the season, and they were guiding players of that capability along,
Yeah, my first order of business after getting the position was I got a hold of those 6 seniors. We went out to eat, and I had a big, long list, checklist that I handed them. And I said, all right, here's our agenda that we're going to talk about tonight. And changes are coming. We're going to make changes. And it's not going to work if you 6 are not on board with everything. I said, I need your help. And there's no way that we're going to be able to be successful this year and down the road without you guys all buying into what we're going to try and do. I said, I want your input throughout. If there's ever something that you think we need to change, hey, let's try this. Just know I'm open to all of that. Let's talk about it. Let's implement it. Let's do this together. And so here are some of the things I want to change. So we talked about a lot of those things, and we were there probably for a couple hours that night. And I think that was a huge part of it. I said, you guys probably want to be a huge part of helping to get this program turned around and get it going in the right direction. And even if we don't accomplish everything that we want to accomplish, once we accomplish it at some point down the road, just know that you started the fire and you got us going. And so that's what I need you to do. I said, hey, look, one thing we need to be concerned with is when you look at the banner up in the gym, is there's only one state championship for Minot High girls basketball on that banner. I said everyone likes to look up on the wall at the other end at all the individual records, and we certainly accomplished some of those. But boy, you better swivel your head around and look at the other end, and we need to start, pushing for a state championship as well.
What was the official restaurant or team meal of the Majettes' first summit to the turnaround here?
I don't even know that everybody ate that night because it was a little bit later. It was like at 8 o'clock at night, something like that. Because one of the girls was coming back from somewhere else and couldn't get there till 8, and so I already was eating. I don't know what I was having, but
I was gonna say, were you like screwing over some waitress or whatever, just hanging out all night, or was this at the Schwarz house?
Right. So no, it was good. It was good, but I just felt like these guys have been around the program enough, and I wanted them to know that all right, things are not going to stay the same. We're gonna try and change things, and you guys have to be on board with what we're doing.
How often have you seen the quality production of some of the younger players, like the crop of sophomores, like Mariah Evenson, Avery Lundy, lit up the gym a time or two as an eighth grader this past year? Have you ever seen this before when you've been coaching a varsity team?
Yeah, I have. I've probably got myself into hot water with some parents maybe in the
You
past.
think so?
When you go and when you bring up young kids, and that happened to me when all of my stops as a head coach, I've brought up. I'm not afraid to do it. Bring up younger kids and play them right away. And it hurts some feelings, but if you want to have a competitive program, there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings along the way, and I've developed some pretty thick skin along the way. So we're going to do things the way I think they should be done, and I know I'm not going to be the head coach forever, but God dang it, we're going to do things my way, and then at some point, someone else is going to take over and they can do them their way. But this is the way we're going to do it. And we're going to try and make our program as competitive as we can. And I'm not afraid to hurt people's feelings. That's just the way it is.
You just have like a full voicemail box, or like way too many emails, or what?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Maybe I think I'm probably that kind of person where people just kind of leave me alone, or whatever. And so I've got the Jim Swaggart approach, and we can talk about that off camera sometime. But
okay, this is audio only, but yeah, the Zoom is the camera, so we'll stay away from it. So also, like talking about like the young players and stuff, and you coming up in this program as a sophomore and JV coach. Obviously, not every underclassman is going to be quite as talented as some of the leading players on the Majettes team. But speaking from the standpoint of just relatability and coaching up younger players, how much did that help you this year because you just had those younger players that could play?
A lot of times I think they come in not knowing what they're getting into, and I think Avery Lundy could speak to that. She just came in and just played. And, when her opportunities came, she just did what she knew what to do, or knew how to play basketball. And that's all we wanted her to do. You were brought up to, shoot the basketball and just go out there and do the things that come natural. And I think after a while, she maybe started to think about it too much. And she went through a little bit of a lull about 3/4 of the way through the season. But when we played teams for the second time, she got guarded much differently. So she got some of the better defenders on her. They weren't defenders that were going to leave her or help. And so, it was a process of where she had to learn how to play without basketball much better, much more than probably she ever had. She was pretty good about playing when the ball's in her hands, but offensively, you got to be really good when you don't have the ball, because the majority of the time you're playing without the ball. And so, it was a great learning experience for her. Mariah also, like you mentioned, had a great season for us. She was somebody that we had to really rely on down the stretch, and she was kind of cut from the same cloth as Allie Nelson. They do things in a similar way, and Mariah can do a lot of things, and she's going to have to do a lot of things for us in the future. But I'm excited about what we got coming up.
I've heard a lot of good things about from coaches and players when it comes to being able to let someone play free enough to their strengths. Okay. Recently talked with Brock Teets now that he took over at our Redeemers, wanting his players to have that kind of confidence. You're going to turn the ball over sometimes, but we can kind of rein it in the next time out or whatever. Jackson Gunville really appreciated how Dean Winchesky kind of worked with him to the best of his abilities and to help the team the most. I'm just curious from your perspective, where is like the fine line between telling the players, hey, be free, be you, and then how do you kind of just get that to fit in to what you're trying to do across the board with the team?
It's got to be every single one of them have got to have the team mentality first. If they don't, good luck getting on the court, at least with us. And so they've got to know that right away. But we certainly, it's a fine line as well. We certainly want to get the most out of you. You need to play to your capabilities. And going back to Avery Lundy, we had to deal with that with her this year because I think coming in, it's just natural for an 8th grader or even a freshman or sophomore where, oh man, there's 6 seniors on the team. I got to get them the ball a lot. They need to probably shoot the ball before me. Or you be the decision makers. I don't need to do it so much. So we had to have that conversation with her a few times where, we brought you up for a reason to play. And if you're not going to play and you're not going to shoot and you're just going to be a passer, you might as well go back down to the 8th grade and go play with them because we're not getting the most out of you that we should. And I said, we had to convince her that the seniors wanted her to do that because they realized she could help them win. And so they wanted you there. They wanted you to do the things that you can do. Don't be passive. Don't change your game. And so when she was able to figure that out, like, okay, yeah, all right. We even saw that a little bit in the JV games where, she was being a little bit too passive. And I think it was maybe some carryover as to how things were maybe going in practice and the games. And there was never a time that I believe that the seniors didn't want her or some of those other underclassmen there. If you can help us win, we want you, And so it was obviously an adjustment. It's going to be an adjustment for any 8th grader or freshman. And, certainly we had some others that were able to step in for us later in the season as well.
What was her initial reaction to hearing that kind of message from the coaches and players? Was it like surprise, like, okay, really, are you sure I'm this good or anything like that? And how long did it take for you, in your opinion, like watching the tape and being in the game where she was firing on all the cylinders and just doing the absolute best,
Well, we wanted her to come and play with us a little bit in the summer just to kind of gauge, is this something what we really want to do? And, we thought, well, she's good enough to at least play at the JV level for us, and she'll definitely be within the competition to come off the bench for us. We didn't really know who was going to step forward in those roles, but we thought, well, she's capable. And I just think as the more this preseason went, the more things went as we started to get into some games, the more comfortable she got with our system. And then she just kind of ran with it. And, like I said earlier, word got out of this Avery Lundy kid. And so teams started to prepare for her a little bit more. And they definitely knew who she was. But, we wanted to see what she could do over the course of the summer, first and foremost. And she was able to, we went to played some of the Bismarck Mandan teams, and she played against some of their big dogs. And it was a little bit intimidated at first, obviously, but we thought, well, I think she can handle it.
Mm-hmm. Now, just looking at your first season, how do you kind of evaluate yourself in year one, and what did you kind of learn the most about your coaching style or any kind of tweaks that you have going into year two?
Well, I'm probably harder on myself than anybody. And I know there's a lot of critics out there, and if you're going to be a coach, you got to be able to handle it, and that's where part of developing that thick skin comes from. But at the end of the day, after every practice, after every game, I go home and I just think through things in my mind, and I'm really hard on myself. Like, God dang it, why'd you do that? Why'd you say this? This should have been done a different way. And you try to come back and just be better for it the next day. But I was pretty pleased that my goal was to come in and I know it's not all about winning, but that's a big part of it. I wanted to come in and win 15 games right away this first year, and I thought we could do it. We won 12. I really felt we should have won 5 more. I'm going to blame myself more than anybody in those 5 games, and that would have been a really cool thing to walk away and have 17 wins this year, and I really, really felt we could have done that. So going into year 2, all right, be a little bit better prepared. There were some things that we wanted to try, a style of play that we wanted to try, and we were trying to mesh our coaching styles together. All of us were together for the first time. That was, I guess, Coach Magnuson and I did work a little bit together the previous year. He was a sophomore coach, and I was a JV coach, and we shared a lot of the same kids. But, I brought in Gary Walhog, who had been at Minot State for several years, and he and I got an opportunity to work together when I was a student assistant at Minot State. So that's where I got to know Gary, and brought in Jesse Roberts and Cody Reynolds. So that was my first opportunity working with them. But just trying to mesh all of our coaching styles and put all of our thoughts together and strategies together and kind of develop our own system. And so there were some things we were trying to do, and we just had to pull the plug on a few of them. And then we lost a couple of games because we were trying to do something that maybe we weren't going to be really good at. We thought we had the potential to be. But when it comes practice time, your practice times are so limited. You can't be good at everything. And you want to be, but at some point you have to be all right, we have to focus on these certain things at practice. These are the things we absolutely have to be good at. And so, yeah, we'd like to be better defensively, be better with our press, but it was something we just didn't spend a whole lot of time on. And when we tried to do it in a game, we weren't very good because we didn't do it much. And so we started to pull the reins back into games and those kinds of things. So, I've got a really good handle on what I think we can do well, this next year. And we're going to start working on those things come June 1 here and get rolling.
Now, whether it was when you first stepped into a head coaching position at Lakota in 97, or even at Minot High perhaps, because it's the Class A WDA, in that head position, it's kind of similar to you guys telling Avery that you can do this. When you were first setting foot and getting your feet wet as a head coach, and you can make the end-all be-all decision to things, did almost feel weird a little bit where you were communicating with your assistants and they were like, hey, coach, it's your call, man, when you were kind of bouncing ideas off each other?
Well, when I first, I had a lot of good head coaching experience before I became a head basketball coach. I was the Metro's baseball coach for it was 3 or 4 years, and I've been a head football coach. And so by the time I I did some other baseball as well. I did the Legion out in Burlington and the high school in Max with baseball. So I had the head coaching experience by the time I got to be a head coach with basketball. So I felt
even day one of that, even you could consider, yeah.
But even then, my first year as a head coach in basketball, I had an assistant who had never coached basketball. So we were kind of diving into it at the same time. But we both had really good coaches that we played for in high school. And so we were able to pull a lot of those ideas. And I felt that kind of gave us a little bit of an edge starting off, being rookie coaches. And so, you kind of look back to those experiences that you've had. You don't have nothing else, And back then I didn't study the game of basketball like I do now. Put in a tremendous amount of time into it. And so, but all in all, you just pick up a little bit more every year and learn from a little bit.
When you look back at your Class B stops, Lakota 97 2000, most of the 2000s at Berthold and Kenmare girls till about 2012-ish. And besides even like the luxury of having fall girls basketball, what were kind of like the high points of your earlier stops in Class B?
Well, when I was in Lakota, my high point was my last year that I was there. I took over a pretty good program when I got to Lakota, had all the starters back they had won a district championship the year before, and so we had a real successful season my first year. Then we lost everybody. But my last year in Lakota, we had a lot of young kids. We had an eighth grader that was our point guard. We started a freshman, a sophomore, and two juniors. And there were 9 teams in our district, and we had to play a play-in game to get into the district tournament. And we were number 9, and we beat the number 8 team to get in. And so we had to play the number 1 team, Wells County, and we upset them the first round. And so that was a huge win. And I often think back to that game quite a bit. But when I got to Berthold, we had to do the same thing I did at Minot High this year. We had to change their attitude. We sat down with the seniors, like, what's your goal for this season? Well, we'd really like to make the district tournament. And we were like, what? What are you talking about? No, we'd like to make the tournament. We'd like to win a play-in game to get into the tournament. And I'm like, man, we see you guys as being one of the best teams in the region. That's what your goal is? Yep. Like, oh my God. So our first year, we made it to the regional championship game. So we were able to change everything within that first year. And, the game went to overtime. Matter of fact, it was against Coach Magnuson. He was coaching out at Surrey. And it went down to the wire in overtime, and then they nipped us and ended up, finishing 4th in the state tournament. Both of our teams had just about everybody back the following year. We had some problems with some kids getting kicked off and whatever, and they came back. We ended up being so poor that season, that second season, we had to play a play-in game because we were missing some of our best players that had got kicked off. So they serve their suspension, they come back, and we're just like gangbusters. And we just rolled. We make it to the state championship game and lose by 2 points. Our best player sat out the whole second quarter. He was cut, and they couldn't get him stitched up to stop them bleeding. And we actually had the ball with a minute to go, and there was no shot clock at the time. And we turned the ball over. Matter of fact, Chris Brown was he's the head coach out of Berthold right now. He was our point guard as a freshman that year and did an unbelievable job. But they hit a big shot with about 5-6 seconds to go. I think it might have even been less than that, and they go away and win the state championship. So that was a pretty special experience right there. And the next few years, we usually made the regional tournament in Berthold. There might have only been 1 or 2 times when I was there we didn't. So we were able to really change things in Berthold, going from a team or a program that didn't really do well in the districts to now we're one of the top teams in the region every year. And then, everywhere you go, you're going to have parent problems at some point. And I did at the end of my time in Berthold, and I left some really good kids, when that time came. And that's kind of when Brock came in and took over at Berthold. So, Brock, if you're listening out there, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I coached Brock when I was Metro's coach at one time, so he and I are pretty good friends. Probably the most intense kid I've ever coached, by the way. But, I look at it as a blessing in disguise what happened, because I got the opportunity to go to Kenmare and got to know some incredible people and work with some incredible coaches when I was there. But, man, the kids that I had there, they won the state volleyball championship 2 or 3 years that I was there. We went to the state tournament 3 of the 5 years that I was there. I had a Miss Basketball candidate, Katie King, and the Miller girls were outstanding. And we had so many kids our practices were so competitive every day because we had 10, 12 kids that just absolutely got after it. A lot of times people ask me, coaching girls or boys better? And, I don't think it matters. It's the kids that you have. Do you have a competitive group? And man, I got to have tough kids, because that's how I coach. I coach them tough. I coach them hard. And so I was fortunate in all of those stops I was at, Lakota, in Berthold, and in Kenmare, where those kids were really tough and they were competitive. And we got some of those same kids within our program here right now too. So I just feel real lucky and fortunate that I was in all of those stops to have the experiences that I did.
You mentioned him during that. What did you learn from Todd Magnuson when it comes to coaching?
You know, I'm going to be honest. I didn't think it was going to work. I really did. You know, he and I were kind of rivals when we started. You know, when I was in Berthold, when he was in Surrey, we didn't really know each other all that well. We were competing for the Minot High job when he got the Minot High job, and he didn't. Matter of fact, he even offered to be be an assistant of mine if I had got the head coaching job, because he didn't want to be the head coach when he got it. And at some point, he changed his mind and threw his name in the hat, and he got the job. And so we just never had the opportunity to really get to know each other until Coach Wasser hired him as a sophomore coach a couple years ago. Still, I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And so we started working together, doing some things together in practice, coaching games together. And the more we coach each other, the more we were around each other, the more we were finding out all of the things that we had alike, all the similarities that we had. And I'm like, this is working out pretty darn good, you know. And then it was a no-brainer to ask him to be my assistant last year, and having somebody who had been at the helm of this program, somebody who cares about the program as much as he does. And Coach Wasser is another one that cares tremendously about this program as well. And so it was I loved coming to practice, because a lot of times I'd give Coach Magnuson the guards and Coach Wahog the posts. And it was so much fun coming every day, because they would come with something new almost every day. And just seeing them work, and me getting the opportunity to learn from them. And obviously I brought some things to the table too that were different, but I just thought we just meshed really well. And it's unfortunate he's no longer with us anymore, because I'm going to miss so many things that he brought to the table for our program.
Yeah, he seemed like a real class guy for sure. Wanted to do a quick pivot here from going from the past to the future, and give you a chance to talk about the best memories of being a hockey dad to Hayden, because, I mean, we're talking about all your experience coaching all these sports, and hockey hasn't really cropped up yet, but he was a hockey player here.
He was, and there was I was coaching in Kenmare his sophomore year. Yeah, I believe it was his sophomore year. And we were playing in Mulhall, and he had a really big game. I want to say they're playing Bismarck Century. And during that game, we're getting our butts kicked. We're not playing well. Things just aren't clicking. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'd rather be at the hockey game than where I'm at right now. And that night, I made the decision after the game, I'm done after this year. My son has only got so much left, so much playing time left. I don't know if he's going to play beyond high school or not, but if he doesn't, I don't want to miss out on anything more. If I want to get back into coaching, there's always going to be opportunities for me. So, matter of fact, we had a district meeting that day, and at the district meeting, I told my athletic director, done after this year. I don't want to do it anymore. And so it was really special, because I didn't miss any games, home or away, his last 2 years. He was primarily a defenseman. He was a big kid, but they were really struggling to score. I think it was his junior year. So they moved one of their best defensemen up to play forward so they could get some scoring, because Mason Morelli, Alex Shaneborn, they were gone playing junior hockey, and they were our scorers. So this defenseman wanted to move back to defense, so he moves back. We're back to not scoring. So they asked Hayden if he wanted to move up to forward. I don't remember if it happened this way, but I want to say it did. His first game, he had a hat trick. if not one of his first games, and it just clicked for him. And it was so much fun watching him play forward. And he never got the opportunity to really do that growing up because he had Alex Shaneborn, he had Mason Morelli, he had Quinn Fuchs, and all those guys were outstanding putting the puck in the net. So they needed some good defensemen, and we had some. And but probably the biggest highlight of that whole hockey career came his senior year. Minot High has struggled with opening round games at the state tournament, and they hadn't won one since they won the state championship. I believe it was it 92? 82?
All round.
So,
yeah,
long time ago. So they're playing Grand Forks Red River. I want to say Red River won the state championship the year before, and the game goes into overtime. Grand Forks Red River had lost their goalie. I think he got hurt earlier in the game. I want to say Hayden had a goal earlier in the game, but one of our guys got a penalty right before end of regulation. So we've got to start on the penalty kill right away to start overtime. And Hayden's on penalty kill with Quinn Fuchs. And I don't know if you know Quinn. You've probably heard the name anyway. But they're trying to kill the penalty, and I'm thinking, man, it's over. They're going to score here because they had the momentum. And somehow one of our defensemen rung the boards behind our net. It came out to Quinn, and he just chipped it out to Hayden, and somehow those two were gone on a 2-on-1 break, and we're shorthanded. And I'm sitting down right behind the goal. I always wanted to be right there when we scored our goal, so I would move every period. I was one of those dads that wanted to be right there. And I had my phone on, and it looked like he was going to pass it, and he gave a little fake and shot and scored, and we won our opening round game. We ended up finishing third that year. I thought we had at least one of the top two teams, but we ended up finishing third. And then the next year, Minot High wins the state championship. And I remember Coach Bennett going up to Hayden after on the ice. You know, Hayden told me this. He said Coach Bennett came up to me and he goes, I had tears in my eyes. You know, a lot of those guys were still my friends. But he was out there celebrating with those guys when the fans kind of went out onto the ice. And Coach Bennett said, hey, Hayden, he goes, I want you to know you had a huge part in us winning this state championship this year because you kind of helped us break the ice the year before and got us over the hump, and we won the opening round, which was just a huge monkey on their backs for so long. And so that was the biggest highlight because after he got dressed and came out where all the fans were, he just made a beeline through the crowd, came and found me and just wrapped his arms around me, and we both were bawling like little girls, you know. And man, there's not a greater feeling than what we were experiencing right there.
When you first thought, it sounds like you didn't really need to sleep a wink on the decision of, you know, getting to watch hockey at that point. And obviously with the championship and everything, it was definitely the right call for you, huh?
Right, you bet. And I don't think I would change anything, you know. And I always kind of thought, well, what would have happened if he'd have been a basketball player? But as things turned out with him as a hockey player, it turned out great. Now,
moving ahead to just what is in the future of what we just really don't know, of course, and this is week 10 at the point of recording for this. So with all the social distancing going on, you mentioned like getting after it here in June. What's it been like planning an off season where you don't know if anybody can like really be together? What's kind of like the individual workout balance versus what you can get called up on, you know?
Right. Well, we're kind of taking things week by week right now. You know, our administration is going to have a meeting here in 2 days to try and determine what we should do for the summer. I see it as a blessing in disguise as to what we're having to do right now. Our kids' workouts are online for them, so they just got to go and see what they've got to do for this week. All their workouts have been designed to be body weight workouts. I don't think we're going to get an opportunity to lift at the school this summer we've got upwards of 250 kids that are going to have to come in, and I just think it's going to be too hard to take everybody's temperature and limit the numbers. If we can only have maybe 50 kids in at a time, it's going to take us all day to get through all those kids. And so I think we're just probably going to have to continue with the home workouts. But I think we're going to be able to get in the gym. Obviously, we're going to have to limit our numbers. We're going to have plenty of hand sanitizer on hand. I know in Bismarck, I don't believe they're letting them do anything in June. So we've got a little bit of an advantage there. The Y League still is planning to start on June 1st, as far as I know. So we're signed up to go play over there. So there should be kids coming from, local schools to play. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But there's no social distancing there.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to guard somebody, and you're going to have to pass the basketball around. Everybody's going to touch it. I know they've got some rules for summer baseball. I don't know how that's going to work either. I've heard the Minot Rec wants everybody to have their own helmets. I understand that. And everybody have their own bats. But when you hit the ball and you got to run the bases, how's that bat going to get back to the dugout? Or
call time. I remember having your own batting helmet, at least for like elementary school headlights days.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Speaking of like just the spring sports, like baseball returning spring to summer and all that stuff, have you communicated any more with your basketball girls about basketball, considering like they're not in their spring sports at all?
Yeah, we've had one Google Hangout meeting, or similar to what we're doing right now. We're doing a Zoom, but I told them I see this as a blessing in disguise, because one thing we have wanted them to do more of, and that is put some time in your driveway. And I think that's a big thing that we want to get rolling in our program moving forward. We've talked about it in the past, and it hasn't been done. It just hasn't. Not to the extent that we need it. And so if we can get this going, and this becomes the Majette way, we can't be satisfied with doing the minimum. I come to the gym and I work out twice a week in the summer, or 4 times a week in the summer. And if I think, well, all right, that's enough. That's the minimum. It's not going to be. If we want to be one of the best programs in the state, which is what my goal is, if we want to be competitive with everybody in the state, we've got to do way more than just doing the minimum. And so if we can figure out a good driveway workout program where the kids are working on their individual games, they're getting a ton of shots up, and I think that's what the bottom line is putting the ball in the hole. That's what basketball is the ball going through the hoop, and we've got to do a much better job of that moving forward. We've got kids that I think are really capable of doing that this next year. And so if we put the time in, we have to put the time in if we want to accomplish the goals that we've been throwing around. So, like I said, if we could establish something of these kids doing this at their homes, in their driveways, and now this just becomes our way of doing things, this could work in our favor, and hopefully it will.
The one thing that couldn't happen, unfortunately, this year was the State B. I just wanted to get your take on that, considering just how feasible would it have been to postpone it like way, way back, and if that would have happened, like, does it avoid having, like, the asterisk on history of, like, yeah, they're the champions, but it's, like, 6 months later, and they're getting ready to do other camps and go to college, like, in a week?
Yeah. And I heard some of those things where some of those teams were still trying to practice. Those kids were trying to stay in shape and do some things. I don't know. It would have been an opportunity to at least have something there other than an asterisk, but it's so hard to do. They've canceled all of the All-Star games already for the summer, so you cancel the state fair. There's no concerts going on anywhere. There's no professional games. There's just no congregating in big crowds anywhere. Could you have maybe had the state tournament with no fans, or just parents are there? I suppose, yeah, you could have done that. If you were going to play out the state B, then you probably would have had to play out the state A. But then you probably have some of the spring sports saying, well, we could have done the same thing. Let's have at least let us have a 2-week season and go play a WDA in a state tournament or have a state track meet. So it from one thing leads to another, and it just probably becomes much more of a headache than you really want it to be, and it's just much easier and safer to say, well, we're just not going to do it. And I don't know, I don't know what's going to happen when school rolls around. I was listening to CNN a little bit today, and they were talking about, all right, talking with the school superintendent, what do you think is going to happen when school starts, when that rolls around? And I'm just like, in the Minot Public Schools, we're running out of room the way it is. Now, how do we stay away from each other? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to come up with.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's crazy time even planning as far as fall. I mean, Dr. Vollmer has to just tackle his summer programs. He's like, I don't even know about that fall stuff. That was the second to last briefing or whatever. So he's got enough on his plate. I don't think we got to have him on the show for going over all that kind of thing. But what I want to spin it a little different of, like, you talk about one thing leading to another, at least in a good sense, especially like in your position. Minot recently, with your job and, Chauncey Hendershot taking over for Barry Holman, seems like internal promotion has been kind of big recently. What makes Minot, I mean, you talked about needing a culture change among the team, but I mean, what kind of makes internal promotion big throughout Minot athletics, in your opinion?
Well, you've got a good feel exactly where things are at throughout the entire program, and we've even talked about it within our athletic staff and some of our staff meetings before, and that's having a good handle on your entire program and putting some time and putting some effort into your feeder programs. I think that's a huge part of competitive success from one year to the next. But you're also connected much more with your coaching staff. You're connected more with those kids versus somebody coming in from the outside. And I'm not saying that sometimes that's not a bad thing either. Somebody coming in, new blood coming in with fresh ideas and not having any preconceived notions of anything that's gone on before. So there can be advantages and disadvantages looking at, both of those things. So it's you got to take it on a case by case basis. Maybe sometimes there aren't the candidates you want from the outside when you want to bring in some fresh blood. But then there's a lot of times where, hey, we've got somebody really good in place. Let's take advantage of having them right here. So I felt like I had a huge advantage. I knew that what I felt, the changes that we should make, and really had a really good relationship, I felt, with the kids that were already there and the kids that were coming up through the ranks and kind of connecting with them at summer camps. So I think that's big too, doing those camps and getting to know those kids at a young age and them getting to know you too.
Absolutely, and it sounds like it was a pretty, easy step from one thing to another as you continue. So I'll get you out on an easy one. How close are you guys to competing for a WDA Championship in the next couple of years?
I think one of the best things that I read in the Minot Daily not too long ago was something that Coach Aldrich was talking about. And he was, I've tried to take a few things away from his culture change as well, take a couple of nuggets. And one of the things he said in his process or step-by-step process is they want it to be, first of all, the best of the worst, all right? And when he came in, they were one of the bottom teams in the conference. All right, let's find a way to be the best of that group on the bottom. And I think, you could look at us being similar to that this year, where we finished at number 6 and moving ourselves up through the ranks and through the standings. It's going to be, difficult this year anyway, because so many teams have got so many kids back. They do lose some real key pieces, Legacy, Century, Mandan lose some really key pieces, Bismarck High, but they've got a lot coming back. We have some really good kids coming back, but with mostly JV experience. And so that's a big change from going from the JV to the varsity experience. So that's one thing we're going to have going against us. I like our ability to score better down the road. So I think that's my expectation for our team moving forward, is that we got to put the ball in the hole more efficiently than we did this year. But we've only got one senior. Alexis Heider is going to be our lone senior. So, when we're sitting here a year from now, we're going to have all kinds of kids coming back with great experience from this next season. And so I think we've got to try and take a step where, we got to try and finish in that top 4, top 5 in the WDA before, maybe the following year after that. Now we're trying to compete for being in the top 3. When you can compete for being in the top 3, now you're knocking on the door to go get a WDA championship. And we know that teams that finish real well in the WDA usually finish well at the state tournament. Right now, I think the East has got a little bit of an edge over us, but it kind of, goes back and forth once in a while. So I really like what we've got coming up with some young kids. Like we talked about Mariah. She's a sophomore. We got a really good sophomore crew that'll be juniors now next year. We've got a couple of freshmen that are really playing well, and we've got some younger kids that, I'm anxious to see them when we start camp here, because probably since the last time I've seen them, some of them have probably shot up a few inches. I hope anyway. So it'll be fun to see them and see where we're at. Maybe they've filled out a little bit more. And I've got huge expectations for us this next year. But, we just have to know that some of the things that we're going to be battling that we don't have a whole lot of varsity experience returning from a large number of kids. And we've got some Bismarck Mandan teams that are going to be at the top again. So we've got to fight our way through that. We got to try and win some games on the road down there. We won a couple of games this year, but it was at home. You're expected to win more at home. Now we got to figure out a way to win on the road.
Yeah, and it's going to be a pretty crazy first early steps here with this off-season, Coach. But we hope everything goes well for you guys as you get ready for another season and just getting that chance to take those next couple steps. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Take care.